Welcome to the Empowered Team podcast. I am your host, Kari Schneider, and today's topic is going to give you so much more effectiveness and efficiency in everything you do because you work with other humans. And chances are you can't do it all yourself. Today we're talking about delegating and some of the traps and pitfalls that happen with that and how you can delegate effectively. Let me start you as this. I can think of 2 clients recently and countless clients over the years that have gone through this process of delegation with the intention of freeing up their own time, with the intention of getting things done more effectively and more efficiently, growing their team, giving their team more autonomy and experience, and yet something goes wrong. What do you do when something goes wrong? Well, first, let me give you an example here. So I can think of a client who had a bookkeeper moving on from the company. So they weren't going to backfill that role right away. And what they did was they delegated some of the tasks to some current members of the team. Now, this seems like a great thing. However, 3 months later, and then even more so 6 months later, they realized how far behind they were on the numbers and how skewed their own dashboard and their own profit and loss was. They didn't have the numbers or the wherewithal to understand what was going on in the company because this person had left, even though they delegated the same tasks to someone else. So why did this go wrong? Oh, what do? Same type of thing, different person, got a project that's in a different location. So the company is still overseeing the project, but other people have been delegated to take care of this project. Then everything goes awfully. It's not done on time. What has been done poorly. There is a problem that might require a lawsuit. There's a number of things that are just going really poorly. However, when I ask the question, and this is a key question, well, what is the problem that we're solving here? And then they go into the details of the project. And I say, okay, so what is the real problem? And then they go into the person who's overseeing the project. And then I say, okay, what's the real problem? And then they go into some of the logistics around that. Again, I ask, what is the real problem? And eventually we get back to the decision that was made in the very beginning on how the delegation happened. And then the consequential follow-up and communication around that problem. Really interesting that it started, the problem that went so poorly down the road started about 2 months prior. And they didn't realize it, but it happened in the moment of delegation and how it was executed. So this is the kind of thing that you realize, holy cow, I'm trying to do the right thing, not only to honor my own time, to grow the business or it doesn't even have to be business. This could be other things in your family environment, in your community. It could be anything where you're choosing to delegate, and then you fall back onto the line that happens in your head, this thought that says, I should have done it myself, or I'll have to not delegate that particular task or that particular project. And that's just not true. What's more true is that I haven't discovered how to delegate effectively yet, and it takes some specific practices in order to get great at it. So if you've fallen into the delegation trap where you're like, yes, this is the right thing to do, I do it, you thought it was handled, and it wasn't. So here's what you do. I'm going to give you a fantastic framework so that you can understand when it's really important to check in really frequently and when you can really release the reins and let them do what they're going to do. This is what we're diving into today. All right, are you excited? Here we go. This, first off, is why delegation goes wrong. Why does it fail? What happened? What did I miss? Well, first, we got to start with that problem in the very beginning. It happened somewhere around the delegation time. It didn't happen when the thing went wrong. It wasn't the person. It was how the delegation was done in the beginning. So here are some of the most common pitfalls in delegating. It's that the expectations aren't clear. And when I say the expectations aren't clear, I'm talking on your end and on the other person's end or people. They don't know exactly what you want to have happen. You didn't communicate exactly what you wanted to have happen, perhaps. But let's say you did. Then maybe if they weren't clear, let's say you communicated really, really well, then maybe the expectations were poor on another end. Maybe there's a third party. Maybe you had different expectations from what they were going to complete. You thought you communicated it well, but it just didn't really land, and you thought they would know more, or based on their experience, they would add more that you wouldn't have to tell them. And then again, it's unclear expectations. The more you clarify and verify as you communicate, the better. Get those expectations as clear as possible. Another big pitfall is misaligned risk assessment. You take a look at the risk of this particular thing and you realize, oh, there was way more risk than I thought. And if I had really assessed the risk accurately, I would have done things a little bit differently than I did. What the heck is going on here? And then thirdly, neglected follow-up. This is the one that is the most common. This is the one that we have the hardest time with, neglecting the follow-up. Now, the frequency of follow-up I'll share with you in just a moment because that is indicated based on the resources and the risk. So in the framework I'm going to share with you, you understand more of how frequently you need to follow up based on the risk, based on the resources. All right, so now you know unclear expectations, got to clean that up. Misaligned risk assessment, we got to figure out how important this thing actually is and what could go wrong. And neglected follow-up, okay, we have to actually not just release the reins on every single thing and then hope and pray that it goes well. We have to have some involvement. Delegation doesn't necessarily mean you are out of it completely. All right, so there's plenty of research that shows how to really do this well. When there's more clarity, when there's more expectation clarity, things go better. So let me introduce to you this framework so that you can understand exactly how to make it clear when you're delegating. It's not just delegate yes or no. It's how do I delegate? How do I act when there's certain things in play? So what I want you to assess here are two main things. And if we were to put this on the quadrant, it's really easy. There's risk. I usually put this on the y-axis. And there's resources required. I usually put that on the x-axis. So if it's made into a quadrant, there's only two boxes on either axis. Then you look at, okay, is the risk high or is the risk low? Is the resources high or is the resources low? And then you look at this box and go, okay, now I can go, am I doing a 1, 2, or 3 delegation? And that's how I want you to think of it. 1, 2, or 3 when you delegate. When you're doing a number 1 delegation, you use a 1 when there's low risk and there's low resources required. There's basically, if something fails, it's minor, it's inconsequential, and the investment overall, whether it's time or money or reputation or humans, the resources are really low. So both are low. That is a 1. That is a, when we use this level 1, I'll tell you what to do with a 1. Number 2 is when one of them is low and one of them is high. It's a moderate risk. So this is the case when, if it's a number 2, the risk might be higher, but even if you're willing to take the risk, the resources required are very low. So you're not as worried. It's a moderate delegation. So your number 2 is the moderate. So another example of the 2 is when the risk is low, but there might be more resources required, like time or energy or people, but the risk is very low. So that would also be moderate as well. It's a number 2, because really it's kind of in that in-between zone. It's not low risk, low resources required, but there is one of those 2 parameters that's higher. So we want to delegate that as a number 2 delegation. And a number 3 delegation, this was probably obvious for you now, is that the risk is high, the resources required are high, And this could be a real problem if anything goes wrong. So we want to decide what to do. So now that you know the 1, 2, and 3 in the delegate, what we want to do is go, okay, well, what do I do when this is the case? If it's a 1 and you've got low risk and low resources required, this is a scenario like you get somebody to order the team lunches. I get my daughter to make breakfast for us because we know we're about to travel and I want her to make breakfast the night before. Low risk, low resources, away we go. Sending a status update email. So sending it out to a group. We want to report and inform everybody as to what's going on. These are low, number 1 delegation tasks or projects or whatever. They are number 1. All right. Now, what you do with this is your behavior. This is how you decide. If it's a number 1 delegation, then you step back. You can release the reins. You're going to let somebody go. You might be checking in on this at the end of the task. You're not monitoring the task. You might check in once it's done. Or you might check in monthly if it's an ongoing thing or an optional light touching base. That is a number 1. But realize that sometimes what we're doing is if it's a number 3, we've treated it like it's a number 1. Oops. Okay, let's go into a number 2. A number 2 is a scenario, remember, it's moderate. It could be a low risk, high resources required, or vice versa, high risk and low resources required. So this is that there's some sort of exposure if it's mishandled. If something goes wrong on this, you know that there's going to be some sort of cost, as in time, humans, money, internal visibility. There's something that could go really wrong here, and you know that it's not massive, but it's moderate. So this could be drafting a presentation for a client, onboarding a new team member, things like coordinating an actual project or an event, and there are multiple moving parts and deliverables perhaps. Those are examples of a moderate delegation. Now in this, remember on number 1, we stepped back. We really didn't have to have much touch or contact with what was going on. Whereas number 2, it's completely different. This is where we're going to have a monitoring attitude. We're going to take action that we have the mindset that says, I am going to keep involved in this and I'm going to regularly check in. That's why it's monitoring. It's not stepping back. It's not letting go. It's not releasing ownership. It is monitoring. And that's the appropriate response in delegation in this number 2 delegation, because the risk is moderate. So this is where you might provide context. You might teach them about the situation. You might check in at milestones. You likely have a check-in structure. So perhaps it's monthly. Sometimes it might even be weekly. So weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, we might want a progress update. So you decide when that frequency is going to happen. And in this mix, in this type of delegation, when it's a moderate risk and resources required, we're going to offer some sort of support and coaching perhaps, or maybe just help. Maybe we're not coaching, maybe we're not supporting, maybe we're only as requested, we'll come in and say, what do you need here? So this is your cadence. You know that it's going to be perhaps weekly. It might be even as frequently as a couple times a week, but this is where you decide what that's going to look like. Remember that there's a risk here. If you just let this drift and you let this go without confirming progress, then this is where this type of project can go off the rails, or this type of delegation is lost. And then you wonder why it went wrong and it costs you so much more down the road, because it seemed like it would be fine. You had the right people and away you let it go, but it was something that you didn't realize because you didn't do a great risk assessment. Been there, done that. That's where you didn't realize it needed a number 2 delegation, where there's a little more contact, a little more touch point happening that can help the communication and troubleshoot anything that goes wrong. All right, what's a number 3? This one I think is the obvious one. is when you must stay close. It's high risk, high resources required. This is important. This is the kind of thing that when you're doing this, it might be managing a major account for a company. It might be where there's property at risk. Money could be lost. It could be a significant investment or a critical plan for the company. So in this scenario, you might be even overhauling a key internal system. Remember, I mentioned the bookkeeper leaving and then someone else took over. That particular internal system was so critical to the company and the company decisions going forward that without that kind of oversight in the delegation, then things went poorly really fast. And the owner of the company was spinning, trying to put out fires because they didn't have the key metrics that they needed in that environment. So that's an overhauling a key internal system. Seemed like a simple thing, just delegate to a staff member that's already there, but it needed some key oversight in the delegation. Now, in this number 3, this is where you stay close. You might have to stay close for a year. You might have to stay close for several months because it's such high risk and high resource. There are some really key things at stake. So what you want to do in this environment is make sure that you're co-designing. You're not just letting the reins go. You're not just helping when needed. You are involved in what's going on. This is a number 3 delegation. Now, in your mind, you might be going, but I delegated it someone else's. Why do I have to be involved? This is important. It's because of the high level of risk. It's because of the high level of resources required. And if you don't stay involved, then you're looking at some real costly setbacks that could potentially happen. And you're really gambling by going, oh, I've delegated it to you. You can handle it, even though that person, you know, deep down, they don't have as much experience. They don't have the decision-making capabilities that you do, and they're in a situation that might be relatively new for them. So this is one that you want to really make sure that you stay close. So this might look like a daily check-in, a meeting. Now, if you're anything like me and you have this concept of going, what? I have to have another meeting slipped into my schedule somewhere, I feel massive amounts of dread. Well, first of all, we manage our emotions, and the more dread you can handle in business, guess what? The better you're going to be able to do at your business, because there's often dread involved in business. But let's say you dread another meeting. By all means, make it flexible so that it can be a different time of day if that one time gets bumped. It can be while you're driving to work or from work. It can be flexible so that you have this 5-minute check-in, and maybe it's 5 minutes or 10 minutes a couple times a day. Maybe it's not just once a day. Go figure. Find a way that it works for you because it's worth it in this situation. It's important because you're a co-creator in this. You need to stay involved. So it might be a daily stand-up. It might be using project management tools. Think of Asana, Monday.com, these different management tools so you can see what's being done live time if you chose to check in 3 times a day to see how things are going so that you become this co-creator and you can contribute using that type of tool at the same time. It's still delegation. You're not doing all of it, but this is one where your hands are still in the pot. You're still mixing and doing things along the way. All right. So if we quickly wanted to go over this and just give a little quick review, this means that if the risk and resources are low, then you're doing a level 1 delegation. You might be just checking in on finish or monthly, and you're really stepping back. You're really releasing the reins. You're going, okay, I think they can handle this. If the risk or resources are moderate, it's a level 2. So either the risk is low and the resources required are high, or the resources required are high and the risks are low. And that would make a level 2. And this is where your check-in cadence might be weekly or at milestones or things like that. You are in a monitoring mode. And then high is level 3 delegation. And this is where there's daily or continuous monitoring via some sort of electronic team capability, or maybe you are having daily meetings or a couple times a day, but you are staying close. There's too much risk and too many resources at stake for you not to be closely involved. All right, I want to just quickly touch on a couple of things, a couple of examples, and a little bit of research, because I think right now, if you really get this concept, it's easy to categorize, and quite literally, you could be saving yourself massive amounts of time by being proactive on the front end and labeling what type of delegation this is and then following through accordingly, instead of paying the time or the money later on with trying to play catch up or fix the problems that happened when you've been delayed or something's gone wrong and you have to pay for it. So a couple things you should know is that meta-studies, when you think of a meta-study, what it is that it's when a meta-study is when someone takes, or a group takes, all the research on a particular topic and pulls it all together to see what all of the research accumulates as an output. So meta-studies are very cool because then you start to see, okay, are there trends that come across all this literature, all this research that's been done? So a meta-study done on decision-making and delegation shows that better decision-making happens when delegation is paired with administrative controls. That's exactly what I've just given you in this framework that's so simple that I've created, a 1, 2, or 3 delegation. That's it. That's an administrative control via the frequency and the closeness that you are choosing to do, whether it's 1, 2, or 3, with how you're delegating. So super simple. This is research backed. Make sure that you're not just taking this as fluff, like, oh, that sounds like a nice idea. No, it works. It works. It works. So that one. All right, next one that I wanted to share with you is that risk-based monitoring in clinical trials shows structured oversights reduces failure. So what this means is that when somebody's monitored the risk, then the failure decreases. If the risk hasn't been monitored and the oversight, where it's some sort of structure, that's the kind of frequency and everything we're describing in the number 1, 2, 3 delegation, that oversight and that risk assessment reduces failure. Okay, awesome. I know that we can learn so much from failure. I know that failure tends to have us grow. However, if we can be smart about it ahead of time, we don't have to go through that pain of failure in order to learn that lesson. We can go and assess the risk and put in the structures that are necessary, and then we're going to reduce our failure. And we actually learn how to reduce our failure. Awesome stuff. All right, so I'd like you to start to practice this. It could be anything. It could be with your family. Like I said, having my daughter make breakfast. Awesome. There's a 1 delegation. Having someone else in the family do vacation planning. That could be a number 2 delegation. There's a little more at risk and potentially resources required, but nothing crazy. And workplace, it could be something like delegating an entire marketing campaign. Well, that might be high risk. There might be more money involved, time, resources. Maybe you're going to be more active throughout that. So this is where you're going to set the expectations. These are pro tips. Set the expectations. Choose the appropriate check-in mode. Are you staying close? Are you hands off? Are you staying back? Are you monitoring along the way? So then you're going to know which one to use. You're going to choose that check-in mode, and then you're going to decide how the feedback goes. Is it going to be that the person reports when they're done? Oh, you finished making breakfast. Let me know when it's done. And then you find those burnt eggs on the pan. No big deal. Then you just have some feedback after you found out after the fact. Or are you monitoring the whole thing because of the age of the person making breakfast, involving hot surfaces and things like that? So those are just small examples on the home front, but you can see how this applies to other things, projects, workplace environment. Now, Most common objections to this is that we don't have time. We don't have the energy. We just want to delegate and pass it off. And what I would say to that is I've seen this way too many times and experienced it myself as well, is that the cost is higher later. So if you think you don't have the time, you're going to end up spending the time. It's just not going to be when you think you're going to spend the time. You're going to spend it later instead of off the beginning when you're planning to do it. And I would much rather spend my time planning and deciding ahead of time instead of reacting and putting out fires later on because I didn't make great decisions in the beginning. And this is just an easy way to make those decisions. Another one is that it feels like I'm micromanaging. They're good at what they do. They're very capable. Let me just let them have it. That's fine as long as you feel really comfortable with the risk and the resources that are put into it. Because chances are, if one of those are high, you need to be involved in some form or another. It's going to actually help the relationship. And you don't have to be a micromanager while you're going through some sort of monitoring situation. You can really emphasize what they're doing, how great they're putting their efforts in, and you can emphasize that it's a feedback loop, that you can contribute, they can contribute, it's working together. If the team or someone you're delegating to lacks the skills, that's a prime indicator that you are there to do some more coaching or teaching. If they have the skills and they've had the experience, that's when you're probably able to step back more. But if the complaint is that they don't have the skills, then that's what one of the original problems is. It's not about problems of the delegation going wrong. It happens in the very beginning where they didn't have the skills and you might have put them in a situation that they weren't ready for. So that's one thing that it's where training might be required and maybe a little bit of support might be required. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's that we can't be having people learn on the fly and be making so many mistakes that it creates a poor culture. It creates a poor working environment as well. So what I challenge you to do today in this wonderful topic of delegation is kind of this blessing and this curse. It's like, oh, I know need to delegate, but I don't want to delegate because so many things go wrong. What I would do is challenge you to look for one thing this week that you can delegate. Could be on the home front, could be in your community, could be in the workplace, but I challenge you to delegate one thing. Just go ahead and take a look. Could be the smallest and easiest thing, but when you do, you choose the check-in cadence accordingly so that you've consciously gone, is it a 1, a 2, or a 3 delegation? And when you've done that, you're going to know, okay, I only need to check in when they report back to me when it's done because it's a 1. I'm going to be checking in every single day because we're co-creating. That's a 3. Or something in between where you are creating when the cycle of check-in or monitoring will be. So that's the challenge, is you this week decide something to delegate and then do the according assignment of, is it a 1, 2, or 3, and how you're choosing that monitoring, how you're choosing that check-in cadence. All right. I am sure there's somebody out there who's either running something up to something greater than themselves that you can share this with. By all means, share it. It's a great tool for people to have seamless delegation instead of the fires that end up being put out later on. So share this to someone that you know it will help. And in the meantime, keep being up to those great things. Keep taking action. Keep taking care of yourself. You are empowered. Have a great day. Have a great rest of your week.